Howdy ho ho, my good humans. How the hell you doing? I am Brandon Sylvia. This is Unnecessary Rambling. Thank you all for stopping by, for tuning in to rank some Spider-Man games today. I just finished up the main story in Spider-Man 2, and I figured what better time than the present to sit down to ramble about some Spider-Man video games. I have been playing Spider-Man video games since the Neversoft game in 2000, 1999, 2000, and I've played pretty much like every main Spider-Man, like every home console main Spider-Man game since then. So, yeah, great time to go back into memory lane, to look back in retrospect and rank these bad boys one by one. So we got this set up here in tier maker fashion, and we got all of the Spider-Man games that I have ever played laid out here and ready to be ranked. So let's not delay this any further. We got quite a few games to rapid fire run through and rank, and we'll start it off with Spider-Man, the Neversoft title. And this was incredibly influential at the time. I think you can make the argument that this might have been the first truly great 3D superhero game, because at this time, or in this generation, you're looking at Superman 64, you're looking at the Batman Beyond game, the Batman and Robin game. You don't have many great 3D superhero games at all, and this one was absolutely great and very influential for other developers to aspire towards when they were creating their superhero games in the future. And there's no discounting that. Sure, if you go back to it today and you see Spider-Man web swinging and his webs are attaching to absolutely nothing as he's swinging, sure, some of that can feel and look a little bit archaic. Obviously, visually, if you're not used to PlayStation 1 games, going back to it is going to be a bit jarring, but it's so fun. And I think the simplicity of this game actually really it benefits the game a lot on a replay or coming to it for the first time, because it is very accessible, very approachable, very simple, and nice, tight, linear levels. So many awesome bosses in this game and awesome boss fights in this game, because this isn't attached to anything. This, as far as I'm aware, this is not attached to, it's definitely not attached to any movie. I don't know if, I'm sure there's obviously comic inspiration in there, but I don't think this is pulled directly from a comic book. I think this was, the script was wrote from the ground up, and they were kind of able to go in whatever direction they wanted to, and that's why you see 856 villains in the mix here. They were just able to throw the entire rogues gallery of the best Spider-Man villains of all time into this game, and that's why you have so many of those awesome boss fights and awesome encounters with Venom and Doc Ock, where you're evading Doc Ock's his lasers, and you have the one where with Rhino where you're evading at the right time, and he's running into the electric beams, and there's just the carnage chase scene. There's so many cool, memorable moments in this game. And yeah, it's maybe I wouldn't go S tier, because is this the game that I'm itching to return to the most out of any of the Spider-Man games on here? Probably not. Would this be the first recommendation I gave to somebody who's looking to go back and play one of the classic Spider-Man games? Probably not, but it's so influential and impactful for its time that I think you have to put it at least in the A tier. And now we head over to Spider-Man 2, the follow-up to that first, PlayStation 1 N64 game. And for the longest time, I thought this game was developed by Neversoft as well, because it looks, feels, and plays just like the first game, only a little bit less ambitious. And it's not developed by Neversoft. It was developed by Vicarious Visions. And I think when you look at it in that light, it kind of changes the way that I see this game a little bit. It's still a good game. It's very much similar to the first game. Definitely built off the bones of what Neversoft created with that 2000 release. But it feels like Neversoft just really threw everything that they could possibly throw into that first game, where it's like, holy shit, we're getting to work with, the Spider-Man license. We're getting to tackle a Marvel IP. We're going to try to make this thing as big and bold and ambitious as humanly possible. And like I said, they knocked it out of the park. The problem lies when going to Enter Electro. You have a lot less options to choose from there when you're looking at the boss list and stuff like that. It's pretty much all the big main names were used in that first game. So, I mean, you still have like Sandman, and you have obviously Electro and Shocker and Lizard, and there's some cool encounters. Don't get me wrong, you have like some cool boss fights and stuff in this game. It's still a good game, don't get me wrong. The bones are so solid with that, you know, that Neversoft formula from the first game being carried over into the second. Still a good game, but on par with the first game, I think not. So I will go with the B tier for Enter Electro. Both games that I would recommend, but I would definitely recommend the Neversoft game above it for sure. And now we head into the movie tie-in PlayStation 2 title. So we're jumping to the next generation here for Spider-Man 1 on the PlayStation 2. And I can't say I have a lot of nostalgia for this title. There's only a few games on this list that I haven't revisited since I, played it initially. This is one of them. I don't think it's a bad game. I just think that we'll talk about Spider-Man 2 when we get there, but after the release of Spider-Man 2, it was like kind of tough to ever really want to go back and play that first game. It is cool that, if you're looking for something a little bit more linear that kind of plays similarly to Spider-Man 2, this is much more linear, and it is also cool to see the improvements with the web swinging when you have the opportunity to web swing in this game. To me, like the main thing I really remember with this game was the Green Goblin boss fights. I really, really enjoyed those, and I actually do think for that alone, I'll put it in the C tier, because out of the Raimi trilogy games, I think that might be my favorite boss fight in all of them. The Green Goblin boss fights were really, really strong, and I think it would be out of the Raimi trilogy of games, I think that would be my favorite boss encounter. But now we get to the follow-up, and I'm not going to even delay the inevitable here. Spider-Man 2 is absolutely an S tier video game, and talking about how influential and impactful that Neversoft game was in 2000, Spider-Man 2 in 2004, I think you can make the argument is maybe the most influential superhero video game ever. Just with looking at Grand Theft Auto 3 and what it created with the open world genre. And you got to imagine Marvel and DC, they're looking at the success of Grand Theft Auto and going, damn, how the hell can we figure a way to get our characters in a game like that, in this fully open world game? And Treyarch knocked it out of the fucking park on their first attempt. That's the thing that's really mind-blowing is, with Spider-Man 1 being a lot more linear and level-based, which it's cool, but that Spider-Man 2, you have the open world, and they use that well with the mission structure, but you also have more linear and level-based missions there as well. So I like the balance and the balancing act that was pulled off in Spider-Man 2 with its just mission design and mission structure. But for a first crack at a fully open world game, to pull off this is crazy. To pull off what is now, you look at the Insomniac games and all of the other open world games that we'll talk about here today, pretty much aped this swinging system, full stop. Like, it is pretty much the exact same swinging system that was created close to 20 years ago now. And obviously Insomniac, they made their adjustments and tinkered with the format a little bit, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And they didn't really have to change much with what was laid out here, because it was so damn good. And to be a kid playing those games, playing the Grand Theft Auto games, and thinking about how your favorite superhero would work in a world like that, and then to get this only a couple years later, it was absolutely freaking excellent, man. I spent so many hours, doing the pizza delivery missions and just existing in that world. I think my only like real complaint with the game would be that I don't find the boss fights to be, S tier level. Like some of the other games on this list have much better boss fights. And like I talked about with the Green Goblin, I think the Green Goblin boss fight in Spider-Man 1 is more memorable to me than anything in Spider-Man 2. But yeah, I mean, everything else it blows it out of the water. It is incredible. And even when you look at something like Ultimate Spider-Man, which we'll go ahead and kill any suspense here and then throw that in the S tier as well. That's absolutely an S tier video game. And that's the tough thing because like if you were to ask me in 2023, which game should I go back to? Spider-Man 2 or Ultimate Spider-Man, or which should I play for the first time? I would say Ultimate Spider-Man. And for me personally, I do revisit Ultimate Spider-Man more than I revisit Spider-Man 2, and I think it is in large part due to the realistic visuals with Spider-Man 2. And it's like, well, if I want to play a realistic, swinging around Manhattan, swinging around New York City, like I'm probably going to play the Insomniac titles. But with Ultimate Spider-Man, you get the kind of base format that was laid out with the web swinging in Spider-Man 2, but you're literally just playing. It looks just like the comic books. You know what I mean? It's one of the PS2 games that I would say has aged the best. It looks so good. It's aged like fine wine, man. It's a beautiful, beautiful game. And if you want to play a game that feels a lot like the PlayStation 2 Spider-Man 2 game, but with a beautiful, beautiful world to explore, to this day, I would highly recommend Ultimate Spider-Man. And there's a lot in it because, Spider-Man 2, obviously, the movie tie-in game, it has its own story beats that it has to follow. And, it can kind of deviate a bit at times. But with the Ultimate Spider-Man game, it is from the ground up. This story is built from the ground up, and you're getting to play as Venom, which is immediately should have you run it. And I think it's still fairly cheap. So if you have an Xbox, a PS2, 360, I think it's backwards compatible with the 360. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have any of those consoles lying around, go pick this thing up if you can find it for cheap. It's so damn good. Getting to play as Venom, and Venom having his own sort of combat and his own traversal methods that are different from Spider-Man's, and you're jumping off a damn building, landing on the road, and it's shattering beneath you. You're picking up cars and launching them at enemies. Like, Venom plays with this brute force feel, and obviously Spider-Man's a lot more agile, and his moves are more centered around evasive maneuvering and agility, and Venom's just a tank, so it's cool to have that duality there, that juxtaposition there. And I mean, the boss fights are so damn strong as well. You have the Wolverine Venom fight, you have the Hulk boss fight, and even just roaming around the open world, there's so much fun shit to engage with, like the Human Torch races and stuff like that. It's a really, really enjoyable game to return to, because honestly, I don't feel it's aged much at all. And that's the tough thing where, trying to find where to rank it. Do I rank it above Spider-Man 2, even though Spider-Man 2 is a lot more influential, had a bigger, like, widespread impact? But I probably prefer Ultimate Spider-Man above it and would return to it as an adult more than I return to Spider-Man 2. I think I will go Ultimate Spider-Man over it, but no doubt at all that Spider-Man 2 had a much bigger impact. And next up we have Spider-Man 3, the final game from the trilogy, and just like the trilogy of movies, yeah, Spider-Man 3 was the worst of the trilogy of video games as well. And I this is the only game on this entire list that I never finished. I never had the desire, the will to finish this title. And I don't know, to be fair to the game, I did have a buddy who went through it and played it and said that it got better the more you played the game. So maybe it's one that deserves a revisit at some point in the future. I would like to revisit it just to kind of see how I feel about it by today's standards, or just going back to it now. But I hated this game at the time. I despised this game when I was a kid, because coming off of Spider-Man 2, a game that I played hundreds of hours of and was just in love with, this felt like such a departure. And it's weird because it feels similar in the movement and the traversal and the web swinging and stuff like that. But the reliance on QTEs with this game really, really bummed me out. And that was like one of the first times I remember hating QTEs in a video game. And still to this day, it's not something that bothers me as much in modern games, which is really weird. So maybe it is one that I would appreciate more on a replay. But at the time, I did not like it because I was expecting just, Spider-Man 2, the exact same thing, but with on a PlayStation 3 running with the next gen hardware pushing it. And I will say, when you boot up the game as a kid and you're coming off of the 6th generation of consoles, it is definitely a leap forward technically and visually. It's impressive to look at the time. But I think when you look even at some of the other 7th generation Spider-Man games that we'll talk about here today, it didn't really hold up all that long visually. I think most of the other 7th generation Spider-Man games that look much, much better. So yeah, for me, obviously, this is going to go straight into the D tier. And next up, we have Spider-Man Friend or Foe. And this game is okay. I would say it's nothing all that impressive. It's just like a little, brawler beat 'em up style title. I played through it a few years back in co-op, and I had fun obviously playing it with a buddy, but that's kind of the age-old argument. Do you actually enjoy the game, or do you actually just enjoy playing any game with your friend? You enjoy the company of your friend more than you enjoy actually playing the game, and I think that's probably the case with Spider-Man Friend or Foe. It's really, really simple. If you're, ever in the mood for a super straightforward, to the point, kind of little brawler beat 'em up title in the Spider-Man universe, then, well, first off, I'd recommend playing Ultimate Alliance before this. But if you ever want specifically to play with, and it is cool, I will say, it is cool that you can like play as some of the Spider-Man villains and team up that way. And there's supposedly it's supposedly tied to the Sam Raimi movies, and that went way over my head. I don't really remember any of that from my playthrough, but hey, supposedly it's tied to the Sam Raimi movies. So if you want to explore that a little bit more, then hey, Friend or Foe might be your jam. But I'll give it a C tier. I'll go below the Spider-Man 1, the PS2 movie tie-in game. Just, you could maybe give Friend or Foe some points for being a little bit more unique than Spider-Man 1, but it's just much, much simpler. And now we move on to Spider-Man Web of Shadows. And I played through this from start to finish this year, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed this game quite a bit. It's another open world Spider-Man title that definitely borrows from the mechanics that were built in 2004 with that Treyarch game, but it is, I think, the coolest, most memorable thing about Web of Shadows is the fact that it has like the morality system. So where you can make kind of good or evil decisions with your Spider-Man and lean heavily into the dark side and embrace the symbiote suit. And there's moments in this game that will really shock the shit out of you.
Hi there, I'm coming to you from the future to tell you to skip ahead about 45 seconds if you don't want any spoilers for Spider-Man Web of Shadows.
And the one that probably most people watching this know about, it's kind of reached meme status at this point, is the one where Spider-Man rips Wolverine in half. You're just not really going to get that type of content in any of the other Spider-Man games here. So for that alone, I will definitely have to put it somewhere pretty high on this list. I wouldn't put it in the same tier as Spider-Man, the PlayStation 1 Neversoft title, but I think I would put it above the Spider-Man 2, the Vicarious Visions title. And I also, a really cool thing about Web of Shadows that you don't see in many of the other Spider-Man games as well is the fact that you can fight alongside the building. So like on the sides of the building, you can engage in battle, and enemies are crawling up trying to take you out and you're beating the hell out of them. And then enemies are flying on the side of the building. You're zipping to them and doing this weird, it's like this, I don't remember the name of it, but it's almost like this, you're zipping to the enemy that's flying near you, and you're kind of like stomping down on them, and it looks like the enemy is you're doing a kickflip with the enemy, almost like it's a skateboard, and then you can zip straight to the next enemy, and if you time the button prompt correctly, you can chain these moves together and pull off 4, 5, 6 of these things in a row. It's hilarious. The only reason I don't think I would put it up any higher is because I ran into quite a few pretty annoying bugs in this game. For one, the technical stuff alone, the constantly dropping frames, that was a bit annoying when you're swinging throughout the city. But even just I ran into a weird bug at the end of the game when I literally just could not move my character at all, and I had to like restart the console and then jump back into the level from the beginning. It was very, very bizarre. And actually, these next two I played this year as well. And first up, we have Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. And this game is unbelievable. This is such a good Spider-Man video game. And that's the bummer, with praising Web of Shadows and praising Shattered Dimensions. It's like, it's great to be able to shower these games with praise, but they're so damn expensive that it's like, as much as I enjoy them, I wouldn't recommend going out and spending $100 on these games. That's asinine. But Shattered Dimensions, if you ever stumble across this for a decent price range, pick it up. It is so good. The story is so solid. It's a multiverse sort of storyline before that kind of got played out, but it's so sick. You're getting to play through 4 different Spider-Man campaigns, and they all have their own unique levels. But the coolest thing about it is that all of the levels and the aesthetic and the visual presentation, the combat, it's all different for each of the 4 Spider-Men. So you have Spider-Man Noir, and it's this like monochromatic, black and white, more stealth-based, evading enemies and avoiding enemies and staying out of the light. It feels a lot more akin to something like Arkham. And then even the boss fights are more geared around timing your attacks appropriately and making sure that you don't get spotted. And then you have like Spider-Man 2077, and it's a lot more flashy, and it has that futuristic sci-fi-esque aesthetic, and his technologically advanced suit allows him to be much faster, and his gameplay feels a lot more like something, character action, Devil May Cry-esque. And then Ultimate Spider-Man, his gameplay is, similar to the Amazing Spider-Man, but the visuals with Ultimate Spider-Man look a lot like Ultimate Spider-Man, the PlayStation 2, GameCube, Xbox game. So you have a more cel-shaded comic booky look with his character. And then, Amazing Spider-Man is pretty much what you would expect, but it's just so cool that each of these characters have a different presentation, different gameplay, and one of my favorite levels ever in any superhero game ever is the Deadpool section in this game. If you don't have any intentions on ever playing it, just go look that up. It's so badass. The entire level is satirically designed around Deadpool, and it's like this reality television show thing that he's shooting, and it is just an absolute S-tier level for this S-tier video game. Now, difficult thing is, do I let recency bias push this over Spider-Man 2? I don't think so. I'm gonna leave it here at the bottom of the S tier. We gotta put some respect on Spider-Man 2's name. That game was incredibly influential. And next up on the chopping block, we have Edge of Time, going back to back with Beanox here, and back to back with 2 really damn solid games. Such a bummer that this team has been relegated to the Call of Duty sweatshop workflow. I'm really hoping with this Activision acquisition from Microsoft that some of these teams can get to work on something a little bit more creative, a little bit more fun, or that's such a hopelessly optimistic statement, though. I'm sure those teams are just fine receiving the royalties and making the big bucks working on Call of Duty. But I don't know. I guess that's kind of the only positive spin you can put on any of that shit, is maybe some of these really talented teams who worked on great shit in the past can go and work on more great shit in the future. But regardless, Edge of Time was a damn solid game. I wouldn't put it on par with Shattered Dimensions, I don't believe. I think my favorite thing about Edge of Time is the fact that it doesn't solely rely on just clearing out one room after another with enemies just spawning nonstop, and you're just beating the hell out of hordes of enemies and button mashing your way through the game. Like, there are certain levels where there's a little bit more strategy, and it's kind of about avoiding battle at certain times and rescuing a civilian while the clock's ticking down. You have these time goals that you have to meet, where I got to get this person out of here within a minute, and now I got to go find them, or now I got to escape this building within this certain amount of time. And it's cool because it actually makes you avoid fighting, which isn't really, that's not like your natural train of thought when playing a video game. So I just like when developers mix it up a little bit, give you something slightly fresh, and I felt like Edge of Time did that in some of those instances. And don't get me wrong, it is still, like I said, a character action style game, but I did really appreciate that, and I do like the combat. I think the combat is pretty solid as well. It doesn't have a ton of meat on the bones. It's not a really long game. I think Shattered Dimensions was around maybe 8 to 10-ish hours. Edge of Time, I remember being like maybe 4-5 hours long. It wasn't a long game whatsoever. So I don't know. I think I would put it on the A tier. I would go under Spider-Man 1, the Neversoft title. I don't think I would put it on the S tier though. All right, and now we hit a real rough point. And like I said earlier, talking about Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 3, games I have not gone back to and really haven't had much desire at all to go back to. These next two, hokey smokes, I don't think I'll ever go back to either of these games. I hated them when they came out. Absolutely despised these games. So yeah, let's go ahead and just slot these in their appropriate places. Both The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 are on the D tier. I think I would go The Amazing Spider-Man 1 over 2 just slightly. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I have such a specific memory with that, where my buddy had bought a PlayStation 4, and I think that was a PS4. If it wasn't a launch title, it was somewhere around that launch window, and he bought his PS4, and this was like one of the first games he bought with it. And we sat there, and we would pass the controller back and forth playing it, and we finished it in one sitting. And not like, oh my god, we loved it so much we played through it for 8 hours straight. It was just like a normal 3-4 hour sitting, playing the game, passing the controller back and forth, and it was over. And we were like, what the fuck? And I know there's more you can do and swing around the open world and shit. And I will say the swinging in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I thought was kind of cool, with the like the L2 would control your left arm when you're web swinging, and R2 would control your right arm when you're web swinging. That was a cool kind of unique idea to separate it from the Spider-Man 2 formula that was laid out and kind of every game took from. But I remember this thing being really damn janky, like really, really buggy as well. And I don't remember The Amazing Spider-Man being quite that buggy and janky and annoying. So I'll put The Amazing Spider-Man 1 above it. I do remember the camera fucking sucking in that first Amazing Spider-Man game though. So I don't know. They're both definitely on the lower end of the D tier. I'll for sure put Spider-Man 3 above that. Even though I didn't finish Spider-Man 3 and I did finish both The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, I wished that I wouldn't have. But we are now moving into much brighter days here as we get to the grand finale and we rank the Insomniac trilogy. And starting off with 2018 Spider-Man. I think we all know where this is going. When this released, it was undeniably the greatest Spider-Man game of all time. And like we talked about earlier, it borrowed from that 2004 Treyarch game with the web swinging, but I think the flow is something that it's hard to even describe why the web swinging and traversal flowed so well in the Insomniac title. There are, key distinct reasons why it worked so well, just like the, ability to run alongside the wall. As soon as you hit the wall, you're running alongside it, and just these modern touches that were perfectly implemented in this game. It's obvious that this team looked at what Treyarch did in 2004 and was just like, what are the proper adjustments, the proper things to tinker with in the, in the perfect way, not to overdo it and, do like the L2R2 thing with the, different hands for the different webs, and not to go too far, but just the perfect adjustments to make this formula, make this concoction absolutely excellent. And they nailed it. And I think that's kind of one of the brilliant things about 2018 Spider-Man, is that you can see the influence so clearly in a lot of their design. Obviously Arkham with the combat, and looking at what Rocksteady built with that combat system for Batman, and like going, how do we do this for Spider-Man? Obviously, he has to be more agile and be more evasive. So, okay, we're making this a lot more dodge oriented opposed to parry oriented, and much quicker, much less tanky, much less brute force than what you had with Batman, and then using all of Spider-Man's gadgets appropriately. And it totally worked. And then you look at some of the blending of the cinematics and gameplay together, and you're like, oh, that's a lot like, Naughty Dog titles. That's a lot like something similar to Uncharted 4. And you're seeing it where you're this building is collapsing and you're running out, and you feel like you have some sort of real agency in these moments, because, you can control the character and move them around, and you can fail those sequences, but it's pretty much on rails. It's pretty scripted. You're probably not going to fail if you are, unless you just refuse to press the button at the right time. Like, you're going to get through it. But it's the fact that it makes you feel like you have some real sense of agency, despite it being totally on rails, and all of these things are scripted to happen regardless of what you do. Before this Spider-Man game, we've talked about a lot of great Spider-Man games here. I don't think before 2018 Spider-Man game, you had a generation-defining Spider-Man game. You know what I mean? You're not going to look at many lists of best PlayStation 2 games of all time and see Spider-Man 2 in the, top 20, top 25. If you look at best PS4 games of all time, Insomniac Spider-Man isn't in the top 20, top 25, whatever, you probably shouldn't be reading that list. Like, it is just literally, in every sense of the phrase, a generation defining title. And I don't think you can say that for any other Spider-Man game. But then moving on into Miles Morales, this is a very, very tricky one, because it's, essentially like a DLC, a more fleshed out DLC, something similar to Lost Legacy with Uncharted. And I love Lost Legacy. It's one of my favorite Uncharted games. Miles Morales is obviously one of my favorite Spider-Man games, but it's not nearly as bulky as 2018's or 2023, Spider-Man 2. It feels a lot more like a DLC, and it was even priced appropriately. I think it was $49 or $39.99. I think it was $49.99 at launch. PlayStation ain't gonna lose that extra $10 there, but it's a great game. The story is incredible. It's a very personal story, centered around Miles, obviously, and his relationship with his mother, and his relationship with his uncle Aaron, and exploring that whole Prowler angle a lot more in Miles Morales. But there's also real noticeable differences in the gameplay as well, with Miles being, having the cloaking ability, so stealth is always much more of an option with Miles, and like the electric powers and shit like that. So there are differences. I just don't know if it's enough to... I don't know where I would put this. I would have a really hard time not putting it in the S tier, despite it not being the longest game. I think the story is so goddamn good. A story about friendship and betrayal, and that ending. The ending is so strong. And it's also just like one of the greatest Christmas games ever. This is a perfect game to play in the holiday season, when you're in the holiday spirit. Like, just even that, Rhino section where you're charging through the mall on his back, and all the Christmas decorations are all over the place, and he's just throwing them bitches left and right. Everything just environmental destruction, chaos ensuing all over the place. It's such a damn solid Christmas game. I have to go S tier for Miles Morales. I'll leave it at the bottom of the S tier, but I have to go S tier. I would maybe like to put it above Shattered Dimensions, but I'll go the bottom of the S tier. But now we move on into the game that I literally just finished today. That is Spider-Man 2, Insomniac's 2023 title. And man, I guess let's open this discussion with the opening of that game. Holy shit. Like, holy shit. Within an hour, you're going, oh, okay, I guess I'm playing the greatest Spider-Man game of all time. And let's back up a bit. I don't know if I 100% feel that way after finishing the game. I did run into quite a few issues. I was surprised that I ran into quite a few bugs. Like getting caught inside of a vent, being unable to move, having to reload my, restart my checkpoint. One where Spider-Man was just like glowing, and then the enemies were glowing as well. And I was like, okay, well, this must have something to do with the story, but it just persisted. Like it wouldn't go away. And so I went to YouTube and looked at a playthrough, and when I was watching another player in that exact same section of the game, their characters weren't glowing. It's like, what the hell is going on here? And it's not like the most annoying, it's not game breaking or anything stupid like that. Like it's just minor, like very minor annoyances where I'm like, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to restart this checkpoint, go back 10 minutes to get to the section where I was at previously, which it's not the end of the world, but it is just little minor annoyances that kind of add up. And I don't know if I think it's as strong narratively as 2018's game. And I don't even think we talked about the narrative in 2018's game. That's a whole nother, the narrative in 2018 Spider-Man. I think that might be my favorite Spider-Man story I've ever seen told. Better than anything I've seen in the movies, better than anything I've seen in the comics. Like, I think that story of Aunt May and her relationship with Peter and her relationship with her work environment and kind of the shit that ensues there, and Peter's relationship with Doc Ock, and you understand the inevitable conclusion of this relationship from the moment you see them interact with one another. But it's like watching the buildup and anticipating those moments. It's just so suspenseful and so heartfelt and emotional, and emotions that I just didn't think were possible to get out of me from a Spider-Man story. It's such a phenomenal story in 2018 Spider-Man. 2023 Spider-Man 2, the story is good. It's good. I don't think it's not even close to 2018's, in my opinion. It's really good, but not close to 2018's. On the other hand, though, I think the combat for Spider-Man 2 is far superior to 2018's game. And the further you go along in Spider-Man 2 and the different abilities that you're going to get in that game, it's, I guess, spoiler alert. This isn't a spoiler, it's in all the trailers, but if somehow you manage to avoid all the trailers and marketing for Spider-Man 2, but somehow you're here watching this video, that I would think that's a little bit bizarre, but let's just assume there are people like that in the world, so I'll say skip ahead like 45 seconds or so. But the symbiote suit in Spider-Man 2, and like we were talking about earlier, developing this Arkham-like combat system, but for a more agile character, the symbiote suit brings a tank-based character into play there, and you're getting to just brutalize enemies with Spider-Man. And so that's like a whole new dynamic, and those new dynamics kind of increase throughout the game, and we'll just leave it there for the time being. But there's some good stuff in Spider-Man 2. There's definitely some good stuff. I'm gonna do a more in-depth kind of discussion. I have been putting off doing a full like what I'm playing episode for a little while. I definitely need to do that, because there's quite a Phantom Liberty, or separate ways now, Spider-Man 2. There's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about, but I think I might do like a little spoiler section in that upcoming video. So stay tuned for that. I'm pretty sure I am going to do a little spoiler section, because it is really tough to just avoid spoilers altogether for these really, huge games that are so story centric. But yeah, man, I mean, the traversal with, the wingsuit, and essentially getting to play as Superman as you're just flying around, and then the new stealth abilities, being able to shoot those web lines, and that creates a whole new dynamic with stealth combat in this game. And one thing I will say as well, side quests with 2018 and Miles, I found a lot of those to be underwhelming. Side content with Spider-Man 2, incredible. Incredible. I've really been enjoying the side content with Spider-Man 2 and seeing how story focused that is, specifically surrounding Miles and his character, which is kind of a push and pull thing because I found Miles to be sort of underutilized in the main story, especially early on, and I felt like the side content was fleshing his character out a bit more, his relationship, with Genki and his mom, and some blooming romantic interest in there as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed the side content in Spider-Man 2. So now comes the difficult part. Where do I place this? It's between Spider-Man 2018 and Spider-Man 2 from 2023. These are the two best Spider-Man games I've ever played in my life, bar none. Ranking them is difficult because, like I said, story, I'm taking 2018's game for sure. Combat, I'm taking Spider-Man 2 for sure. I think there's a little bit more variety in Spider-Man 2, which I appreciated. Also, like I said, side content I prefer in Spider-Man 2 over 2018. But oh man, this is so tough because I don't think I ran into any bugs in 2018 Spider-Man at all, and I ran into quite a few in Spider-Man 2. But it's like, do I let a few minor annoyances outshine the entirety of an excellent product? This is really, really tough because the thing about Spider-Man 2 is my expectations for it were sky high, and it mostly delivered across the board, other than a few minor nitpicks like some of the story beats and one section in particular that we'll talk about in a later video. But with Spider-Man 2018, I had no real expectations. You know what I mean? It's not the same Insomniac that we're talking about today. I don't think people were expecting that 2018 game to just knock it out of the park in the way it did. You're talking about an Insomniac that was coming off of Songs of the Deep and Ratchet and Clank was solid. 2016's Ratchet and Clank was solid, but I don't think people expected Insomniac to have that in their bag, to be able to pull off that in 2018. So there was this surprise factor, this holy shit, I can't believe what we're seeing factor in that 2018 game, where I was fully aware of what Insomniac was capable of with Spider-Man 2, and they knocked it out of the park. I'm really struggling, man. I could literally just sit here and stare at the screen and make different cases for each game all day long, but I think I'm going to leave it where it is. I think I'm going to go 2018's game at number 1 and 2023's game, Spider-Man 2, at number 2. It's really tough, and I might live to regret that in the coming weeks and months and years as I ponder this, but for the time being, I'm going 2018's game number 1 and 2023's game number 2. Well, shit, man. Here we are. That's the official ranking of every single Spider-Man game I have ever played in my life. And I'm still so indecisive on that 1 and 2 slot. I'm pretty confident in where I ranked everything else. I think I'm totally confident in where I ranked everything else. But that 1 and 2 slot, I feel like I could really sway the other way at any certain moment. But we're going to leave it there. But drop your list down in the comments below. Let me know your top 10, your top 5, your GOAT, your favorite Spider-Man game of all time. For those of you out there enjoying Spider-Man 2 right now, I salute you. And I hope you're not too mad at me right now for putting it at number 2 on my list. It's an incredible game, and I might even be mad at myself in due time for putting it number 2 on my list as well. So, but yeah, man, if you enjoyed the video, drop it a like and consider subscribing. Do all that good stuff to help out the channel, to help it get pushed by the algorithm gods. I would greatly appreciate your support. And with that out of the way, that's the official ranking, and this is me signing off. I appreciate y'all for tuning in, and I will see you good people in the next video. Goodbye.